Welcome to the Savage Worlds GM podcast. I'm your host, Jared Savage Daddy Gunning. This episode, like all episodes, brought to you by the kind fellows over at Roll20.net. Check them out today, the world's largest virtual tabletop, Roll20.net. Tonight's topic, I'm going to introduce the topic, then continue with the preamble. Tonight's topic is bad, wrong fun. As GMs, what are we doing wrong that we could do better? If you want to follow us on the social media, we're at Twitter and Facebook at SWGM Podcast. Check out the YouTube channel, like, watch, subscribe, tell a friend, YouTube/SWGM Podcast, and the new Patreon channel, SWGM Podcast. Download and subscribe to the podcast itself proper on iTunes, Savage Worlds GM Podcast. So as I said, tonight's topic, bad, wrong, fun. Here to discuss it, Dave, the rules, Maven Scott.
I swear, I thought it was a small wound in a fur coat.
Some call him Jib. So what do we mean by bad, wrong, fun? Kind of a sort of a, you're doing it wrong. A little bit of a, you're doing it wrong. This is much a GM confessional by the host of the show as it is a parable for anybody who's a GM of Savage Worlds or any role-playing game for that matter, and role-playing. Learn from our mistakes. We're gonna pull the curtain back and admit our foibles as GMs.
I think a good number of these are honestly just GM mistakes and less so much Savage Worlds mistakes, but we'll see what we come up with, I guess.
And if you're watching the live broadcast stream on YouTube, feel free to participate in the chat, and we will address some of that here in the show. So let's get started. I'll start with one that was brought to my attention during the green room. The wave of combatants and never-ending combat in phases and waves. Okay, well, here's 4 mooks thrown at the party, intended lambs for the slaughter, followed by another team of 2 mooks and a wild card, followed by another team of 2 wild cards, all waiting in certain gates for the players to run like rats out of a ship just to be mowed down by machine gun fire. It can turn what should be a very dramatic scene into a 2-hour slaughterfest. And it can almost seem, from the player's perspective, like, God damn it, you're hell-bent on killing one of the characters tonight, aren't you? That's what this is all about, you son of a bitch. The intention isn't there. That's not the intention going into it. It's, fuck, I don't have an idea for a game tonight. Hey, guy walks in with a gun. That's interesting. Let's see what happens.
Oh, look, that was really cool, but it's over and I don't have anything else. Hey, you know what? The guy's friend walks in with a gun.
Then his cousin walks in with a gun.
Yeah, and the Latino gang that he pissed off a week ago show up suddenly out of nowhere. Just in time for a drive-by.
Look, I don't have I know. I don't have a hook for tonight. So those guys that the players got in combat with like 3 episodes ago that got away, they show up and ambush them in waves.
Yeah. It's also this too. It's not the quantum ogre that we talked about before, where I'm just going to pick up this scene I plan to drop it over here. It's the vortex ogre, where the whole time and space opens up and everything just starts fucking pouring through.
And I think the issue really comes from you're in the moment, you're doing this thing, and you've got buy-in from the players because combat's fun. I mean, it's really exciting to drop dice on the table, see 27 points of damage. Everybody goes woo, and then you narrate bodies on the floor and blood spray. So okay, I'm just going to shovel some more combat in there, and then you realize that what you have just done is let Savage Worlds have a chance to happen. And then all of a sudden, someone drops a 20-point soak roll for an NPC. Or all of a sudden, an NPC drops an attack that does 1 point short of 4 wounds in a single attack to a player character. And on a dime, that scene turns from something that was woo, exciting, great way to get everybody's blood pressure up for the beginning of the game, into, oh shit, that's going to be the whole session right there, because now they have to rescue that guy who's about to die.
Yeah.
And now all the players are throwing their characters away, trying to drag one character bodily away from the combat.
Yeah, it's a role playing. It's the role playing version of the schoolyard tale where somebody's flipping rubber bands at people. It's funny until someone loses an eye. Like, Jesus, Bob, it's just a game. Oh, you took out his eye.
And so at the top of the show, I said these are more GM problems than they are Savage Worlds problems. This one, I think, is a little more exclusive to Savage Worlds, because Savage Worlds has combat that literally can end for a character in a single round. In D&D, you can throw a warm-up combat every time you guys sit down to play. You can do the proverbial, and we start with a barroom brawl, because the player characters have so many hit points that there's nothing in the bar that could threaten them. Somebody hits them with a chair, they might have to drink a healing potion or sleep overnight, but there's no way they're in danger of loss of life. In Savage Worlds, someone hits you with a chair, that could genuinely be a one-shot incapacitation killing blow. All just right there.
Right, or it could also result in a permanent injury where it's, well, now you got a limp, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Permanently. It can get nasty.
And it can do so really quickly. And that's there's the common idea that you need so many combats to have a fun session. No, this is where, as a GM, you have to learn, in Savage Worlds, you only throw combat at your player characters when it's absolutely appropriate to the moment, because the players initiated it, or the players have done something where someone else is going to initiate combat against them. You don't just use combat as a filler in Savage Worlds, because it's a very, very deadly filler.
Well, and I'll say this too. So having experienced that recently and done that recently, my thought immediately after the game was, ew, that got really fucking ugly. All right, next session, no combat being forced on the players. It's going to be an investigative rescue somebody game, and they'll have the option to get into combat if they would like to. I'm not going to force it on them. So,
which is equally a bad idea. And I will just segue to what Jim mentioned in the green room, where there's that, okay, so I'm not going to throw combat at them at all. We're just going to have a nice, dry session of roleplay.
Okay, there's nothing wrong with that, unless you do what I did last night, which is be dead-ass boring. I know exactly what the problem for me was last night. I had no energy. And so that is a mistake, okay, to go into a game as the GM with no energy. If you cannot find it or summon it up, it's a night to do something else.
Why is that?
Because as a GM, you have to bring the thunder, as it were. You have to bring energy to the table, because you cannot assume that the players are going to have energy. Why should they have energy if you don't?
Well, I hear the argument all the time that the GM is just one player. Everybody else at the table can compensate for the GM having an off night. No, because you're playing one character. The GM is playing the rest of the characters. So as the GM, I sit down and I just am not on it that night. There's going to be a whole lot of flat, lifeless interactions, because everyone your character decides to talk to, you're peppy and they're not.
Well, not only that, you as a GM, you're setting the tone really for the game, right? Everybody looks to you to lead and establish the tone and the pacing of the game. They really, you know what? They rely on you more than you believe, more than you could ever possibly imagine, to get the fun out of their game. And if you're phoning it in, it's like Elvis or Whitney Houston right before the overdose. People go, "Oh God, that show was horrible." They were fat and bloated, barely moved. They were singing off key.
I'll be right back.
I was thinking Jeff Dunham right after the divorce when he was showing up on stage drunk and just not delivering the jokes. You could see his mouth moving when the dummies were talking the whole 9 yards. But so what I was alluding to earlier is you can do the overreaction thing where you're going to overcompensate for last session in this session. But what Jib's talking about is more the you show up and you're only there as a husk, as a GM. That might play if you're taking the role of a player character. It doesn't play at all if you're the role of the GM. And worse yet, and this I think is an aspect of that. It happened for Jib in a role play heavy session where every interaction at the table is someone trying to role play off of that lifeless GM.
Right.
Go stand in a room with a mannequin and role play against the mannequin where they're giving you nothing back and see how enjoyable that is. And that's the experience you just gave to your players.
Right. Well, and no matter how tired you are, I think that if you let's say you're wiped out. Now you could be going, oh, I'm feeling tired, and I'm just a little down, a little low energy. I really need to take a nap after this. That may be your perception of how you feel and what you look like. And then somebody sees you and goes, oh, Jesus Christ, man, are you all right? Are you fucking like dying? You look like shit. Yeah, your estimation of how on it you are, not calibrated.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, to a certain extent, that's really not overly different from when you're running something you don't want to run. And we've talked about that before is, one of the biggest mistakes you can make as a GM is to open your table up and let them tell you what you're going to run next because it sounds fun to them, but you have no freaking connection with the setting. It's like if we were to sit down at the, our next session 0 and everybody at the table told Jared that he's running an Avengers style.
Fuck no, he's not.
Avengers style.
Fuck no, he's not.
Supers, and it's just not something Jared can run. It's people sitting down with me and saying, hey, we're going to run an alt history time travel game. And I'm going to go, yeah, I don't think you want to do that with me because I'll literally be describing your characters having to use chamber pots and, having the spittoon in the corner that they have to, avoid because if they don't, they're going to have to roll against cholera. Because my idea of time travel is you start facing all those things that you don't think about in modern life that are the reality of the times you're going back to. Because people don't realize that, even going back 100 years, wow, the difference.
The BO alone, just the body odor alone is, my God.
You think about 100 years ago would put you at 1917. So this is right about the time that we're going to have the introduction of sewer systems in places like New York and Chicago being finalized. So you still have the one bathroom for the hotel or the outdoor outhouse that's shared by you and your 3 neighbors. No.
Not to mention a horrific economic depression, right?
Well, that's a few years later, but yeah, it's
that era.
No air conditioning, so everyone is walking around in wool clothing in hot weather, and let's see, no deodorant, but then there's also the no TV, so everyone expects you to sit down and play checkers with them, or dinner time, everyone is required to get up and sing, so now we're going to run an interlude that no one wants to be part of because no one at the table can sing a 1917 appropriate poem or juggle the way their character is expected to in that scene, and they don't, as players, they don't connect with that time frame enough to say, well, my character gets up and does a little juggling act, and then I have them give me an agility roll to see how well they do, because they, as a player, don't think of that thing their character could do to fit in with the timeline.
Right. No electricity? Or very limited, right?
But even to get off of just that one specific thing, you can talk yourself into a major clusterfuck by agreeing to run something you're not enamored with.
Right. Instead of coming to the table with, okay, I've got 4 options.
Mm-hmm.
And these are 4 things I, as a GM, want to run. Pick one. Yeah. Newbie mistake. Oh, you guys pick anything you want.
Never run something that you're not excited about.
Mm-hmm. Because it's going to show. Yeah. It's going to show up at your table. You're going to be flat. Like, oh, fuck, I don't care.
Yeah. You're going to have what Jim talks about having last session every session because you're not invested. So it doesn't matter even when you do have a high energy night, you've got nothing to bring because this isn't your ballywick.
Right.
Right.
So anybody want
that doesn't mean you couldn't try something new, but if you can't get excited about it, why should they?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anybody want to talk about quantum ogring?
Well, I would argue that in Savage Worlds, there's no need to worry about quantum ogring because you shouldn't be planning ahead that much. I would take it the other direction. I've done the whole, I planned out every room in the dungeon. I knew what was where. I knew what triggers would cause them to, hey, my monsters need to make a notice roll to see if they heard the thing from 2 doors down, and then decide whether or not they would actually go on a patrol to find out what happened. I did all of that, and then my players decided to just go the fuck else. And all that prep never came to the table. I have it sitting in a 3x5 card box about 8 feet from where I'm sitting right now on a shelf. Because I have all the prep, I have all the maps, I have all the rooms, numbered encounters, the whole 9 yards. I've never run that dungeon. No one's ever gone into it.
Yep. I think Mel Primus brings up a very good point, especially when it comes to Savage Worlds. Making sure that as a GM, you've selected appropriate setting rules. He writes, like the Rifts game where I decided to Benny reroll the missile launcher damage, setting rule basically everybody gets and no mercy. It's called Blood and Guts. You can spend Benny's to reroll damage. Every character, and did 56 damage to the Dragon Hatchling player, dead PC. If you're not playing a really heavy, gory game, you probably don't want to include Blood and Guts as a setting rule.
Yep. So I'm going to say this. The problem I see with what Mel's saying is not that it happened. It's not that he rolled. It's not that he spent the Benny. That's all well and good, and it's Rifts. It's supposed to happen. The problem I see is where he's taking responsibility for a dead player character. That's your character allowed themselves to be in a combat with somebody with a rocket launcher. You weren't in sufficient cover. You put yourself in a position where death could happen, and it's Rifts. It's going to happen sooner or later. I think there again is a bad fun thing is the GM accepting I've got to keep you all alive.
Oh, yeah.
Jim is holding up a finger, so I'm assuming he wants to say something on this point.
Never go up against a glitter boy when death is on the line.
Well, you hear that all the time. Oh, the GM killed my character. Oh, fuck you. The GM doesn't kill characters. I don't kill characters. Player choices and bad dice rolls is what kills characters.
A GM can absolutely kill your character, but I would say probably somewhere in the order of 80-90% of the time, that's not the case. That roll the clock back, 20 years, absolutely. That's what most of the GMs at the time were being told was their job at the table was to kill off a player character. But we've moved way outside of that style of play, and now there's very few out there that are doing it, and the ones who are not cagey about it. They're not hiding the fact that they want to do that. So you've chosen to play with the antagonistic GM, knowing they're an antagonistic GM. So I hate that whole line of discussion because it's so disingenuous. We're arguing something that's not actually true. But in this case, what I see is just this idea that as a GM, I feel bad if a scenario comes up that ends up in a player character's death. No, don't. That's your job as a GM, is to make sure that if that happens, it's interesting. The player gets to narrate some last action, or you narrate a really heroic thing that their character's doing in the death throes. Some way that this is an interesting interaction, and then there's an allied extra right there, or a GM NPC that player gets to roll for the rest of the night. Something that the player gets to do to stay engaged and part of the fun of the game. They're not punished as a player because their character died. There's what your responsibility as a GM, not keeping their character alive. So that, when they take a rocket to the chest, you go, oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to limit that. They're only allowed to do 1 wound. No! Your character took a rocket to the chest. They caught a case of the dead.
But Dave...
Nope. 56 points damage. The dice have spoken. That character's dead.
Yeah, but hold on a second. No, it's too early in the game. That's anticlimactic. I need to fudge that shit in the player's favor. I only cheat in the player's favor.
I will choke you.
I'm making a statement about wrong, bad kind of fun as a GM. assuming that you get to be the arbiter and decide whether or not the character survives. Despite what the dice have declared and the story is declared.
You might as well throw out the rules if you're not going to play by them.
If you're not going to play by the rules, don't use them.
Well, yeah,
don't say you're playing Savage Worlds, because you're not.
Yeah, but okay, but it's really early on in the adventure, right? We just opened the scene, and Bob, who has no horse riding skill whatsoever, decides to hop on a steed and give a spirited chase to a thief through a very thick, forest, and and he falls off the horse because he makes a bad riding roll and breaks his neck, and dies.
Too bad.
That's anticlimactic. I need to, oh no, you didn't die. No, that dice roll doesn't mean you're dead, even though the incapacitation and we rolled it says you do. Nope. I'm gonna impose my will as a GM, and he's only mostly dead.
Okay, so here's what I will say to that. That very specific disingenuous situation you're throwing out, where everything works perfectly, that no one at that table is happy, that Bob is now out 5 minutes into the game and has nothing to do. In that situation, one, you probably shouldn't have had him roll the dice if you didn't intend for something to possibly go wrong. If you don't want a negative thing to happen in your game, even if what they're rolling the dice for is a positive thing, you don't have them roll the dice. Second, if everyone at the table agrees that Bob didn't break his neck, then no, Bob doesn't break his neck. We only roll the dice when we all disagree. So yeah, the rules might call for an incapacitation check, but I might rule that that's just bumps and bruises from falling off the damn horse, because we all agree that him taking 2d6 falling damage from the top of the horse doesn't make sense right now.
Okay, right, but here's
another part of this, okay? You could totally say, oh, Bob, damn, that's a sucky ass riding roll. Off you go, blam, 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 onto the ground. You take 2 wounds. I didn't roll dice. There is nothing that says you had to roll the dice and roll 2d6 falling damage. There's nothing that says you have to do that. But if I roll 2d6 falling damage and that fucker aces 10 times, and now he's sitting on 60 points of damage, sorry, Bob, you're dead.
Well, we go to the vigor incapacitation. You roll a 1, you're dead. Yeah, by the rules.
Right.
We follow all the way down the tree.
Incapacitation thing.
That's
going to happen.
Okay, but here's what I'm saying: as a GM, it's bad form for the GM to decide if the GM is called for that role, because there's more than one thing at play here. Bob knows he has no riding skill. What the fuck is Bob doing on a horse in a high-speed chase over dangerous, rough terrain?
Here's what I would say. It happens the most, not with the scenario you're describing, where Bob's going to be part of the rolling. It happens more where the GM rolled that damage behind the damn GM screen and is trying to fudge the damage down to 1 or 2 wounds instead of rolling out in the open and having it explode to do 4 wounds, and then making Bob explain how it is he fell off the horse and died.
Right.
You know, how did you take 4 wounds falling off of the horse? And that is an interesting way to tie the player back in to something that got rolled in the middle of the table if you decided to put dice on the table. That keeps that player engaged. It keeps the game.
So you know, Bob fell off the horse, took 60 points of damage, and then hideously failed his vigor roll, and now Bob's dead.
Just dead.
Oh, well. Sorry, Bob. Bad for you. The rest of this session probably should be about the ramifications of Bob getting dead. And Bob can hang out as a ghost, watching this happen and finding ways to influence what's going on.
Right.
But you're going to have to be creative as a GM to make that happen.
Yeah, and there's lots of ways that you can go about. Yeah, there's lots of creative things you can do when, oh god damn, Bob's dead. What I'm saying is, as a GM, the bad, wrong fun of this is the hubris as a GM to decide for the player whether or not their character is dead. You're violating player agency by, oh no, I'm fudging the dice because this doesn't happen.
Players, and they don't even know that I did it because I am trying to protect their fun at the table.
Right, and I'm also trying to protect my story. Because if Bob dies right now, I don't know what the fuck happens. I didn't intend for that to happen. So as a GM, I need to pull in the reins, see what I did there, and make sure that we keep the story on track. But what I'm saying is it's the bad, wrong kind of fun as a GM. It's a patent mistake because there's a couple of ramifications from this, not just story-wise. Number one, if you coddle the player never grows to understand, hey, maybe doing shit I don't have skills for is not a good choice. So that when it comes up again, that player character can go, wait a minute. Now I'm aware of what the risk can be. Because I've had that bad experience with Bob. Now the next time it comes up to do an untrained, unskilled check, you know what? Maybe this isn't the best idea unless, oh shit, I got 20 bennies. Let's fucking go for it. You're what's the word? Denying the player the experience to grow as a player, understand the rules better, and what the impact of those decisions are. And you don't get to decide. It's this hubris thing that you assume the player is going to be wicked pissed at you, that the character is dead, and you know what? It's been my experience. You can players can die in your game, and the player could be totally fine with it. Actually enjoy.
As a matter of fact, in my experience, as a rule, they prefer for their death to have some meaning behind it. So when something random goes totally haywire and they get dead in a random fashion, guess whose job it is to give it meaning? Yours, GM.
Oh, I think it's everybody, everyone at the table.
Here's the thing: you can have. Let's take this again. A highly disingenuous situation.
Why don't you tell us a story from your own experience recently, Mr. Rules Maven?
Well, before I get to the throwing Dave under the bus, I want to talk about that patronizing hubris thing that we're talking about here. Is so you as the GM decide when you rolled 4 wounds behind the screen that you're going to drop that down and have it only be 2 wounds. Or 1 wound, or whatever. You decided that. You stopped the player from making the decision whether or not they wanted to try to soak it, whether or not they wanted to try to make incapacitation rolls against it and spend bennies there, whether or not anyone else in the party wanted to use a power to negate this from happening, there's a lot of other interesting things that could have come out of that happening that your players all have dials and controls to do on their character sheets that you're denying them the right to use because you're protecting their fun by not letting them use their characters to their fullest capability.
Right.
That's number one.
Totally agree.
Two, you might have a situation where the story is a lot better for everyone else at the table because now they're going to take off after this guy and track him down to find out what was so important that Bob needed to die for this guy to get away. They have a story narrative motivation now for this chase and for the big scene that comes after it when they, confront this person, or the several long sessions that you might run them through where this guy that gets away is the constant showing up and fading away NPC nemesis that keeps getting away at the edge of the crime, and they're constantly chasing him down because of Bob. You've just negated that major story hook because you decided behind the GM screen that it was more fun for Bob not to take that much damage because you were afraid your players might react negatively to it. Now, to tell a Maven story, I have had a session, probably the most fun session I've played in Savage Worlds ever. And I died in that session with 2 separate characters. I had time between when my first character died to roll up a second character, be narratively reintroduced to the game, get involved in roleplay that resulted in my character's death a second time in the same session. Both of those deaths had narrative impact on multiple sessions thereafter because the other player characters were able to roleplay off of what happened with both of those characters' deaths. One death resulted in my character becoming a zombie, and a whole mishigas happened with that. The second character's death resulted in a third player character that wasn't controlled by me ended up committing suicide in a couple sessions later in a very dark zombie apocalypse game where players committing suicide can be a very fun thing. The player enjoyed role-playing that out and saw ample motivation for role-play of their character going off to commit suicide over a murder that they had committed, killing off one of the actual living in a world of the dead. It was a very interesting storyline we never would have played if that character hadn't been allowed to die. Right. If instead Jared had hidden that damage or hand-waved that damage away or hand-waved away the incapacitation or in whatever way circumvented the rules, then that whole thing doesn't get allowed to play out. So there's a big aspect of know your player in this, but there's also just the get out of your own way and let the game be the game. Stop trying to outthink this game that you all agreed to play because of what you think is fun, and start letting everyone at the table have fun with the actual game you're playing.
Yeah, I gotta let go, man. Let go, let dice.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna throw this one out here in between transitioning. I think we beat the don't fudge the dice and don't protect characters from death or player characters from death baton pretty well. Alec Muzzy. So you don't have anything planned, as usual, and you go to the adventure generator. Okay. How do you turn a random encounter into a memorable evening?
The same way I would create a memorable evening without using the random generator. The best tool you have is right here, Alec. Between your damn ears. Jim has said, I don't know how many times now, immerse yourself in that setting prior to running something. And then you have a fucking bucket load of ideas that when you run out of things that are interesting to do, just pick one of those things out of that bucket and drop it in front of your players.
Yep.
I'm not a big fan of random adventure generators or random encounters. in Savage Worlds. I get it in D&D because the idea is, hey, here's a way to get some quick XP, or here's a way to get the blood and the juices flowing on a combat that's really not dangerous, or just a random encounter. I'm not a big fan of the random encounter because it's random.
I just like random encounters.
Yeah, I prefer something that's more story driven, or comes out of story.
It's not about random encounters. The adventure generator is typically draw like 4 or 5 cards, and it tells you the general like trope of who the protagonist is, who the antagonist is, what the twist is, etc. And it's a set of charts typically. The interesting thing with that is, and this is, at least for me, it's very much, I consider it a challenge to take the adventure generator and come up with a narrative around it that fits the setting and the sessions that we've had previously. To me, it's a problem-solving game that I go through during prep whenever I go to an adventure generator. And 90% of the time, I won't use it. Adventure generators are really great the same way a book of 50 random plot hooks is a great tool to have in your toolkit. But for me, I'm to the point I would rather run with nothing prepared, reacting off of my players, because that's what my players and I have the most fun with. Right. But as far as like an adventure generator, being able to sit down with that and draw those cards and go, okay, so I have Colonel Mustard with a candlestick in the library, and the twist is that the antagonist is his mother. How do I make a story out of this? And then I create the Orient Express.
Well, I'll tell you that of all the settings I've seen as far as adventure generators, I think Deadlands Noir does an excellent job creating a mystery, a solvable case mystery with the adventure generator. See, I have a different approach, and this is just a style. I don't know if this is a wrong kind of fun situation, but I'll ask myself, okay, well, what's happened in the story up to now? And these are usually things that I didn't invent, that I just dropped a plot seed on the table, and oh god, it grew into this tree with a lot of apples and shit on it, and the players end up creating most of the situation. So I'll ask myself, okay, so what's happened so far? Okay, so we got the group together. They were sent out to intercept a shipment. Turns out the Russians were smuggling in heroin. They ended up stealing the car that contained the heroin. They put the heroin out on the street. Okay, well, gee, so maybe the Russian mob shows up wanting their heroin. Maybe the Russian mob shows up wanting their heroin and sprays blood everywhere. Oh, and now the fucking cops are involved. Gee, what would happen if the cops got involved in the middle of a mafia, Russian and Italian mafia heroin hit squad? All the characters get called in for questioning. Here we go. Here's my story tonight, because it's evolved naturally out of what's already happened,
right?
And it's a naturally occurring consequence. So I might get to that point and go, oh, okay. So tonight's adventure is going to start with the police rounding them all up and bringing them in for an interrogation. Now, what they say, what they do they go along quietly? I don't have a fucking clue, because my name tag says Problems Department.
And I don't think that's a question of good fun, bad fun, as much as the adventure generator is there for people who can't do the same thing you're doing, for the people who need a little more structure. And we've talked about this in regards to Chris has said openly on the show, he needs that structure of something planned to improv off of. And we've all agreed that I think Chris could do really well without it, but the fact of the matter is he doesn't want to. He enjoys having that structured set in front. Right. Well, I would say the bad fun is over-reliance on either one. If you're relying on the adventure generator so much that you can't improv, then you're going to have a bad session, because the adventure generator can't tell you how to tie all those things together. It can give you the disparate parts, but you still need to be able to weave it all together into a story that's fun for your players. Just like you're over-relying on improv and you aren't any good at it, you're not going to pick up on the subtle clues and the things that your players are doing that lead to interesting things they actually want to explore. And instead, you're going to keep throwing random problem after random problem at them, thinking that that's fun, when really that's no different than taking a caged monkey and throwing shit back at them all night long. Yeah, sure, they're going to react, but that doesn't mean that anybody's enjoying that moment. You can overdo in either direction.
Well, I think there's also a little bit of a indication here in the question itself. How do you turn a random encounter into a memorable evening? First of all, you're not in control of that. You can't decide as the GM, I'm going to take this random encounter that I've created, and God damn it, I'm going to do this excellent job and sculpt it into a good full fucking fun time. No, I mean, a lot of that's on your players. You can facilitate that to the best of your ability, but you've got to let go of this illusion that you're in control of what happens at the table. You're not. You are not.
You have to let go of the illusion that it's your responsibility for everyone at the table to have fun.
Right.
This goes back to that topic we were just talking about where you're patronizingly trying to protect their fun. This is the same thing, except you're going the other direction. You're trying to control everything that happens to make sure it's all fun. You're not trying to protect fun to take away the bad. You're trying to force the fun, which doesn't work either.
Right. It's like trying to convince a 16-year-old, hey, we should get your entire class together and take them all to Chuck E. Cheese for your birthday. Yay! Dad, God, no. Come on, it'll be fun. No. Maybe when I was 8.
When I was 9.
What? I'm just trying to make sure you have some fun on your 16th birthday, son. Dad, it's embarrassing. How could it possibly be embarrassing? Yeah, it's like, no, come on. Get in the car. We're all going to go have fun now. You just can't. You can't force that. It's got to occur organically at your table, and you've got to kind of let go a little bit of that idea that you're in control of it, because you're not. We all know, like, okay, well, here's what I'm going to introduce, and here's what's going to happen. Check your scorecard. How many times did what you predict is going to happen ever fucking happen? Not a really high batting average, I would anticipate.
You play with the same players long enough, you will have a pretty good idea of what each one of them is going to suggest the party should do when you introduce the plot hook. But you have no idea what happens once the rubber meets the road, because the players then have to decide among themselves which of their ideas they're going to go with. And then once that happens, dice are going to determine how good they did at implementing that plan. There's no way to plan for this shit as a GM.
Right. And there's no way for you to control any of that. And I'll give you a great example. We're playing a modern-day Mafia game on Friday nights. It's kind of Goodfellas-esque, set in the 70s. The very first session we run, the player characters are returning from Vietnam, getting off of an airplane, walking out of the airport, and they're surrounded by Vietnam War protesters. Now, I just set that as dressing
it's
for the scene.
The backdrop painted on the wall. It's not.
Yeah. I did not anticipate any kind of encounter or whatever. And I just mentioned one of the people at the front of the line at the edge of this burgeoning crowd looks at you and says, "You baby killer." And I'm thinking, okay, so we're just going to move on. I've set this tone. And the player character goes, I punch her in the face. What? You do what? So, yeah, forget it. You can't control what's going to happen at that table. You just have to be ready to deal with it.
It's true.
So, I mean, if we're going to do, mistakes you've made at the table, things. Here's a story from Uncle David, I guess. I've talked a lot about different things I've done where somebody gets away with a player character they shouldn't have. One of the ones I don't tell as often is one of the very first times I ever played Savage Worlds. I had a player basically build a Bruce Lee type martial artist. He took all the right things. He took two-fisted. He took ambidexterity. He took first strike. He took improved first strike. So by the end, the party decided to do this wedge formation around him so that he was always out front and all the enemy NPCs walked up or past him. And he was just smiting everyone and rolling like a goddamn god. And this is where, as a GM, I got that tunnel vision and kept trying to attack what he was doing and find a way to cancel first strike, or have a guy with a gun who's going to counter that maneuver. I kept trying to mechanically engage with what the player was doing because of the fact the entire group was now using that as the spearhead to easy mode their way through everything I was putting them up against. The problem is, by trying to engage directly with that, I fed that as a feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
It reinforced that what they were doing is right. They're using the game mechanics and the rules, and I'm using the game mechanics and the rules, and what they're doing is working, so they're going to keep fucking doing it. I should have come at that crab and found a way to come at them narratively, use their situation against them. I had another player character who was going around with a cutlass and cleaving people apart. And this was in a Pirates game, and she did it in Trinidad. So with that character, what I had, instead of going after her with combat, I went after her with the guards. The guards show up and clap you in irons and take you to trial for murder of the 6 people you killed in the city street. And now you have to admit in broad daylight that you're a privateer and that they were pirates. And that you did this without warning the city guard. You were hunting pirates in the city streets, which is illegal, and pay a fine and the whole 9 yards. So you can absolutely find other ways to challenge your players that don't feed back into what they're doing and reinforce those negative player habits. If you attack a player head on when they're doing something that is, shall we say, a creative use of game mechanics, they're going to double or triple down on what they're doing, because what they're doing is working, and what you're doing is just pointing out that it works. You have to find a way to make them want to broaden their character and to add another trick to that character, because you're not challenging them any way other than the one. And that was the thing I wasn't doing. I was so dead set, because Savage Worlds was brand new to me, and it had all these bells and whistles, and I got lost in the forest and couldn't see the trees.
It happens to everybody. I think the takeaway we should leave everybody with about this is everyone's going to make mistakes. We all do it. We can sit here on a podcast and say, well, you should do this, and you should do that, and you should do this other thing. But we all make mistakes too. Nights too.
Oh, still to this day, like currently.
So here's my cheap GM mistake for you not to make. Don't give up. Don't say, "Well, I suck as a GM. I'm not going to do it anymore." Use it as use that mistake you made as an opportunity to learn and to grow.
Find a way to embrace what you did as a mistake and make it a moment that's fun for your players. I ran not long ago, I ran a Firefly-esque game, and there was this dramatic task where they were going to use shuttles to drag salvage to the ship and do these slingshot maneuvers. I completely forgot the -2 for a dramatic task. Mm-hmm. So they were making just straight rolls and just acing the whole thing. And so instead of going, oh, well, we have to redo the whole dramatic task over because I forgot to enforce this penalty, I instead hit them with, and here's a contract where you have to be ace pilots because you've just proven you're ace pilots. And now you have to replicate those results a couple of times. Did I mention only one of them actually had the ace edge or was a trained pilot? You give, on a long enough timeline, everyone rolls bad sooner or later.
Well, I think so. I think the other thing too is not realizing you're doing something not by the rules, doing it for a while and then reading it and going, oh shit, I've been doing this wrong the whole time. Oh, okay. Note to self: next session we're going to run a dramatic task and do it correctly. And I'm going to say to cowboy up on that commitment to do that. And I'm going to just give you an example. For the longest time, I was running dramatic task where, oh, you got a complication? Okay, just give me the same roll to -4 for this round. And if, for a success or a failure and then moving past it. What's supposed to happen in Savage Worlds when you get a complication is there's supposed to be something you have to overcome right then and there. And if you fail that roll, shit goes tits up and sideways immediately.
Yeah, the dramatic task ends on a failed complication.
Right. And
it doesn't go on to the next card and you just need an extra success now because you failed the complication. No, the whole dramatic task went tits up.
So I'm running, they're trying to make this, I'm running a space adventure where they're trying to make a planet-side landing through an ion storm, and they drew a complication, and I'm like, oh God, I should just let them make the piloting roll. Nope, we're going to do this. I said, we're going to do this appropriately. Here's what we're going to do. All right. One of the main engines blows out. All the navigation goes offline. You have to manually make this piloting roll. -6. Make the roll. And they failed the roll. And I'm like, you crash land. You come in hot with no direction. You crash land. Let's see. What's the collision damage in a vehicle? And everybody limped away from that dramatic task with a good 1 or 2 wounds. Like, oh, fuck. At the very beginning of the game. And I'm going to say this. It made all the world of difference. It set the tone for the rest of that adventure. Like, oh, shit. This is serious shit. We're in a serious game. Fuck. And the first time I did it, some of the players that I've been playing with were like, hey, whoa, wait a minute. Don't we get to roll? Nope, I've been doing it wrong the whole time, guys. This is the way we're actually supposed to run it. Sorry, you crash land. Well, don't I get to make a piloting roll? No, you all don't know. You crash land. That's the bad thing that happens when a dramatic task fails. It's a failed, done. What's the worst possible outcome? Crash land. Boom, damage.
And it doesn't have to be the worst possible outcome, but it's a bad outcome. It needs to have some teeth to it. It doesn't necessarily have to be the ship blows up and everybody dies.
Right.
Well, there's a catastrophic failure and the one engine blows out and that does a chain reaction. The other engine goes and takes the fuel tank and everybody dies in a fireball. It can be you all survived the crash landing. Here's your level of fatigue. Now what do you do without a ship?
Right.
And that sets up. Now that failed dramatic task set up the whole rest of that session and maybe several sessions as your players are now going to have to survive on an alien planet.
Not only that, so another example would be like you're disarming the one they use in the book. You're disarming the bomb. Okay, well, we get a complication. Oh, your tool slips out of your hand. That's a complication. You got to come up with something. Give me a smarts roll to figure out how to
thing before it falls and hits to
right.
The bomb.
Yeah, give me an agility roll to grab the tool as it's sliding out of your hand. Oh, you failed. You see it hit, disconnect the wire, and you see the timer speed up. Zzz, and now it's reading 3 seconds before it detonates. Run, motherfucker, run! Is what it turns into.
So there's a question here in chat from Mel Primus I want to touch on. Sure. And he goes, ever had a player that rolls dice to determine if they see something or know something when the GM didn't ask for a roll? I'll get back to that part of the question. And did you ever do something wrong, bad, fun, in response? Yes and yes. So, Jared, do you want to take this one or shall I? And I wonder if we're thinking of the same session.
I don't know. Go ahead.
So,
I'll know what you...
classic example of this. I'm running a Conan the Barbarian session, and all the player characters start out in chains. And I've got 2 of them that are fairly strong and 2 of them fairly weak. Jared's playing the big dumb ox trope, and I believe Mabel, my girlfriend, was playing the other kind of big, strong warrior type. And Jared immediately just smashes his chains up in the opening round and takes the fuck off like a shot. And no one else succeeds. And I got so tunnel vision that they tried for a good 7 rounds to break their chains. All the while, they're yelling for Jared to come back and help. And instead, Jared's rolling notice to see if he hears them calling for help to give him an excuse for his character to continue to run off, being a monkey wrench thrower, just trying to, make my entire life go up in flames as a GM. And my response to this was to lock in tunnel vision on them and then put him in progressively worse and worse situations the further he got from the party. Well, it made sense. He's trying to escape a slave pit, and now he's the only slave running for his life. So there's no one else to distract or help him. So all the guards are after Jared. So of course it's progressively going to get worse and worse for him. And for them, they've now got a task they just can't overcome. And 2 of them just, without dice explosions, there was no chance. And one of them was just rolling poorly. And that tunnel vision was, again, me over-relying on one challenge aspect. Instead of going, hey, you guys could all pool your strength together and use a rock and have this over in another round. Instead of finding a way around that, I just locked in, no, you have to make a strength roll against the durability of the chains to break them.
Right.
I locked in, that's the way to solve the puzzle. And that was my mistake as a GM. And of course, none of the players reacted to say, hey, can I try X? Because I kept asking for, well, give me another strength roll. Well, give me another strength roll. And they never thought, well, hey, what can I do to break this chain? Because at that point, they were just in that mindset of the GM asked me for a strength roll, therefore that's what I have to do this round. Right. And you can get into this where you preload what the player's action is going to be by suggesting to them, well, give me another X from whatever it is they failed to do the round before, even though since then, while you were off dealing with, player B, player A may have come up with a new thing they want to try. And they don't want to try another strength roll this round. They want to try something else.
Right, or the classic, I'm going to make a smarts roll to see if I understand the instructions on this bomb. Oops. And the GM hasn't called for it. Oops, I didn't make it. The GM would go, all right, bomb detonates. Try to apply the logical outcome instead of going, thanks for the roll, but I didn't ask for a roll. You're not being challenged to do anything right now. So I mean, there's a little bit to saying, hey, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I didn't ask for a roll.
Now, the flip side to this, I will say, is something that you should embrace whenever you have a player do it, is you get the player who's playing the low smart statted character who says, I just thought of something brilliant, but I want to make a smarts roll to see if my character would have thought of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Situation, that's a great time to have the player tell you what it is their great idea is. Have them make that smarts roll, and then you tell them back how their character twisted it if they failed the roll, and what their character is now convinced they want to do, because you've still played with the player's agency. You've let them have that decision-making factor that they want to go with this idea, but now it's been twisted by that dice roll based on the intelligence of the character.
Right. Well, and then I think the other thing too is the classic not being stern. I don't want to sound like a dick GM, but not being stern enough with the players at a specific point. So let's use Bob as an example again. He's healed up. He's on a crutch, and we're in a medieval fantasy world, and he's bringing up the rear in a march through that same dark forest at night. And I go, hey, Bob, give me a notice roll. And Bob fails the notice roll. So I tell him what he thinks he hears or what he sees. But the second Bob fails that notice roll, or I tell Bob notice roll, I see every other player at the table. Head goes to the sheet. They come back up with dice in their hand, and they're making notice rolls. As a GM, cowboy up and go, hey, I didn't ask everybody else for a notice roll. Bob's the only one in a position to notice what I'm asking him to notice. No, you cannot make a cooperative notice roll. You're preoccupied with something else.
I actually wait until they actually throw the dice down to tell them that, because I take a perverse amount of pleasure in looking at that. Wow, you got a 24 on it notice. Wow, that'd be awesome. Too bad you wasted that roll.
Yeah. One of the more interesting aspects that I love to do with this one is to ask, hey, who has, and then throw out a skill. Who has knowledge arcana? And then when that person says, yeah, I do, great, give me a notice roll. Well, knowledge arcana is why they get to make the notice roll. They're not making a knowledge arcana roll to identify something. They're making a notice roll to spot the thing they know to look for. Right. They know how to spot that shimmer of a rune in the grass before they step on it. And no, the thief who's at the front of the chain, who's about to step on it, doesn't get to spot it because he doesn't know to look for it. But the mage 3 people behind him does at a -2 because he's back a ways from it and it's nighttime and it's long grass. But the mage at least knows what he's looking for. And oh yes, when the thief steps on it, the thief still suffers all the ramifications of stepping on that rune, whatever they may be. Entangled trap, explosion, teleportation that sends them halfway across the world. I don't know. It doesn't matter. They're going to suffer it regardless of the fact they didn't get a dice roll. But the mage absolutely is going to get a dice roll to give them a warning.
Right. Well, and I think this dovetails nicely into something that's kind of unique to Savage Worlds as far as learn from our mistake. Don't take skills so literally. Learn to apply skills in a very wide breadth. So a great example, using notices as stealth to blend into a crowd. So instead of asking if the character doesn't have stealth and their idea is, oh God, I'm being chased by the guard, here's a huge throng of people just walking down the street in the middle of a parade, I'm going to duck in and try to blend. Well, what they're trying to do is stealth. Hold on. I would say that you could just require a notice roll and apply a negative to the to whoever's trying to notice.
Maybe, but I would argue that the player character who wants to get away, but they don't have stealth, I would absolutely let them use their notice to spot places that their character could hide. Give me a notice roll, and if you do that, I'll negate the unskilled penalty because you've identified spots that might make good hiding spots because you're so good at spotting these different things in the crowd. I could see that as an unorthodox manner of using notice, but actually having them make a notice roll to apply a notice penalty to somebody else, it seems a little hinky to me.
No, I'm talking about them not making a roll at all. Where whoever's chasing them into that crowd, it just makes a notice roll at a negative penalty because they blended.
You might as well at least give them the ability to make the unskilled stealth check.
Okay, let's try something a little less pedantic then. Persuasion as disguise.
Oh, absolutely.
Because what you're actually trying to do is convince somebody that you're not who you are and that you're somebody else.
Whoa.
So, wait, where's the disguise skill? Persuasion. Give me a persuasion roll.
Yeah. Persuasion. Stealth.
Did you knock out the stormtroopers and put on their armor? Great, Han Solo. Add a +1. Hey, Luke, you're a little short for the stormtrooper. -1. Just use a kind of what I'm trying to get across is don't be so literal when it comes to, oh God, there's not a skill in Savage Worlds for that. Of course there is. What's the intent? What's the intended outcome? Find the skill that really works the best. Repair to sabotage something. Oh, I'm gonna sabotage this car, so I'm gonna cut the brake lines. All right, give me a repair roll.
Yeah.
Do you have tools? Nope. Okay. -1. Do you have the skull doll? Nope. Okay. -3 with a D4.
Investigation to use a computer.
Right.
There's a lot of different ways you can go about that. Though some of the more interesting ones that I know we've talked about on the show before are things like the mage character who doesn't need a knock spell. They just go around doing lock picking and trapping it with magic, or things of that nature always seem interesting. I think we've talked about it on the show before. Is you could have a character who maybe knows capoeira, and instead of having a skill on their character sheet for dancing, they just use fighting because their fighting is their dancing, and their dancing is their fighting.
Right.
You can be very, very
flexible.
Flexible is a great word for it. I was going to say trappings heavy with every part of the system. A great example of that too, though, is think of the whole aspect of vow from the core rules. You've made a vow. Well, the vow oftentimes gets taken literally, like a vow of poverty, a vow of this, or a vow of that. The vow could also be used in a very different manner. Like pacifist could actually be done as vow. Your character has vowed to never kill anyone. So now instead of having that, they take a -4 or they are unwilling to kill in these situations. Now they have this vow that's been violated and has ramifications on them. Maybe their god strikes out against them because they broke their vow, or you start having them make a spirit check at the beginning of every session because they need to atone to that man they killed, despite the fact they vowed they would never kill anyone. You can play with the different things in Savage Worlds and not take them quite so literally, to a very wide array of possibilities. But again, I think this circles back to the Alec Muzzy question about how do you take the adventure generator and turn it into something fun, or questions we fielded last week of, how do you do these different things? A big part of it is you have to be creative enough to role play that shit.
Right.
And not depend on the book to tell you how to do it, not depend on the person next to you to tell you how to do it. You just got to think of the creative thing that makes the most sense and is fun.
Right. And I'll also throw one more thing into the ring if I'm not having a senior moment and it completely escaped me. Oh God.
Weird.
God, what was it? Come on. Stupid brain work. It was along the lines of the trappings and the skills. Oh geez, age sucks. Here's the thing. I want to get across. A bad GM mistake is trying to allow metagame knowledge to be achieved through mechanics. So, for example, I've heard this one all the time. Can I make a notice roll or a streetwise roll to see if I detect a lie? No. What? No. Well, I think he's lying. Okay. How are you going to prove he's lying? By looking at his facial expressions? How is that going to tell you he's lying?
Okay.
Careful, because you're about to head into an area where they will argue with you.
I was going to say, that one's very arguable. There's an entire video game that was made on the basis that they filmed actors pretending to lie and pretending to tell the truth and giving it away with different facial tics. And they based it on information they were given by detectives who say, this is what I look for when I'm interrogating a suspect.
Okay. All right. Okay. So let's say an end case. Let's say an edge case. We're playing a detective game and you're a detective or you're a reporter or you're a district attorney. Absolutely. Give me a notice roll to see if you see anything hinky. You're a dirt farmer and you think this guy's trying to cheat. Fuck you. No, not with a notice roll.
Maybe if we're talking about the dirt farmer's wife and you think your wife is lying to you, you've got enough basis of information for how that person acts. I might give that to you. But if you ask that your dirt farmer character gets to determine whether or not the city guard is telling you a lie, and you get to see the city guard twice a year, Fuck no.
But I see that as a, well, wait. I'm sensing, I'm as a player, I'm sensing that this is a red herring, and I want to avoid red herrings. Hey, GM, can I make a notice roll to see if he's lying? I think if your characters are trying to use game mechanics or skills to get a metagaming advantage in a situation, as the GM, you kind of be the gatekeeper on that. Go, hold on, wait a minute. What are they trying to do? How would you know if he's lying if you just make a notice roll?
I will even go a step further and say, if your players are trying to do that, they're indicating to you the type of story they want you to run. And that's a great moment to throw out whatever you had planned and react to what your player is waving a sign at you, saying they want the game to be about. Whether you go left or right from that junction doesn't matter. Whether you make it a lie or you make it absolutely the honest truth and the player goes on a long goose chase chasing a red herring that wasn't a red herring is entirely devoid from this. But that is a great moment to realize your player has just indicated they want more of that type of a moment in the game. They want more of those types of challenges. Key off of that and start feeding that desire too.
Well, can you think of any? I mean, that's a very specific example. Can you think of anything else? I'm trying to communicate not to allow access to metagaming information that doesn't make sense in the story through a common skill or mechanic.
The one that comes up every fucking game I've ever run is everyone wants a common knowledge roll to know where the city streets are in the area that their character is currently at, to know where a water source is in the woods, to know to be able to find a game trail in the area that they as a kid found because their character is of course from this place, despite the fact they've used that excuse 1 out of every 3 sessions for the past year, regardless of where the character is currently standing.
Right.
You know,
so
there's always an aspect of how can the player character look at their character sheet and leverage that into something immediately, regardless of how they got there. You should be aware of what they're doing and either find a way for them to acquire that knowledge another way. No, you can't give me a smarts roll for it, but you could give me a survival roll to try to track down water in the area, since that's actually what the survival skill does.
Right.
I think I have better trained players than you, because my players don't ask if they can use a skill to do something. They say, can I do a thing? And then they leave it to me to go, yeah, roll this for that.
Well, real quick, I want to hop over real quick since Dave mentioned common knowledge versus skill rolls and knowledge rolls, knowledge versus common knowledge rolls. Want to make a real quick diversion and tangent on that. Here's how I view common knowledge. Common knowledge is just that, common knowledge for where your character is. It is not a skill that you've developed or honed or knowledge that you've obtained through decades of experience or study. And here's an example I will give you. You could call yourself a geek. Your character could be a geek or a nerd. And they're aware of Star Wars. They're aware of Star Trek. They're aware of who the main characters are. Maybe a catchphrase. That's common knowledge. Now, the person who has knowledge Star Trek is the character who could quote you episode plot lines, talk about the narrative of how Gene Roddenberry got it on nose, is a fucking trivia maven on the subject because they've dedicated intensive hours of research and study and or decades of exposure. That's the difference between common knowledge and focus specific knowledge.
There's a great little kind of GM tool you can use when common knowledge comes up to determine whether or not what the player is asking is appropriate. Stop for a moment as the GM and think of some topic you personally have not studied. You know, I'm going to pick on Jared for a minute because I know this is one that Jared doesn't know anything about.
Comic books.
Soccer.
What?
Soccer. You know, the player character is required to know the name of a specific player for a specific team who plays in the English Football League. As a player, I know that because I might follow European football. But my character doesn't have that anywhere in his character sheet. It's not listed as a hobby. It's not listed. He's not from England. There's no reason for him to have that link. So the common knowledge role might result in him knowing that that player is a professional athlete. But he wouldn't know the player's name or what position he plays, what team he plays for, how many points he scored in the last game. Those would require a specific knowledge skill, whereas knowing he's a professional athlete in Europe, oh, absolutely, you can give me a common knowledge role to know that this famous name is a professional athlete in Europe, because that's come up on the news a time or two. You think of it in those terms. Think of a topic you're not well versed in, and truly, I mean, sit down and actually think about something you're not versed in, but that you might have heard of, and layer the amount of information the player is trying to get against that. Right. Would you know that about somebody in that topic? Or
the easiest way to describe that is exactly what you're alluding to, is a sports figure from another place. Okay? I mean, if you don't live in Los Angeles, and I happen to live in Los Angeles, name the 5 starters for the LA Clippers. Beats me. I got nothing. I don't follow basketball. I have no idea.
Well, another example. So here might be another example too, right? You have an elderly character in a modern game. So you're playing character present day, and they're 75 or 60, and you hand them a smartphone, or you hand them, basic like Twitter. Like they all send a tweet. Do what? Common knowledge? No. What? I didn't grow up with this fangled tech. I don't understand this. Goddamn computers. Don't trust them. I don't trust them. I write out checks on paper because I don't trust the banks, and I don't trust that damn internet. I don't have an email address. That character at best is making a common knowledge roll to -2. At best, even though it's part of the zeitgeist that everybody knows, they didn't grow up in the generation that's familiar with it. You could also, do it that way as well. Sorry for the tangent.
Another one there though is, the player characters need to get from point A to point B. Well, they either automatically get there in the car, because driving a car is not a difficult task. There's no dice rolls involved. They might make a common knowledge roll because everyone uses cars to get everywhere in your setting. Mm-hmm. Or it's an actual race against time with, people shooting at them. Now it's time to actually pull out those chase rules and have drive rolls every round.
Right.
Be very careful that you don't overcommit to this idea. Oh, because it says driving, every time they go driving, they have to give me a roll. Or, right. Oh, it's climbing. Yes, there's a ladder, but give me a climbing roll anyway.
Right.
And yes, if you fail, somehow you cannot go hand over hand up a ladder that is dry and has a safety harness.
Right, because your customer suddenly suffered a terrible stroke. Falls off the ladder. No, like the same thing too. The same thing too when it. Oh goddamn! Senior moment again. I had it. It's. Give me a second. This is great pod, by the way. This is awesome pod.
As you say, it's straight to the great party.
Jesus. Nope, it's not there.
If you're a young person who would like to join the Savage World as an additional intern to help bring new blood.
Oh, got it. Got it. Knowledge computer, knowledge chemistry, knowledge demolitions, knowledge. Don't pick anything like science, way too broad for a knowledge skill. Knowledge biology, knowledge geology. Guess what? If you're in a sci-fi setting that has computer locks, your character that's got knowledge computer does not need lock picking.
Or your character that has lock picking doesn't need knowledge computer to bypass the electronic lock, because every lock is electronic in that setting. Lock picking applies.
Right. I'm gonna make an explosive out of household products. All right. What's your knowledge chemical skill? chemistry skill. Oh, I don't have it. Well, I don't think you're making a. I don't think you're making one. Well, no, I'm gonna try to throw some shit together. No, I don't think that's gonna. Nah.
You absolutely can do that, but the bomb is really only capable of bursting a 20-ounce bottle. Maybe it does enough damage to shake somebody, but can never cause a wound
or
cause some smoke or noxious gas. But it is absolutely not an effective demolition.
Yeah, or you let him make the roll and it has all the effect of dropping a Mentos in a Diet Coke 2-liter. There's your big explosion. There's a lot of fuzz. There's a lot of fizz and foam everywhere. Awesome job combining Comet, Pledge, Bleach, and I don't know, Windex. Good job. Way to go there. Way to go there, Bucky. You don't have to. Okay, let's listen about the yes and real quick, and then we'll kind of wrap it up on this one. The yes and. I think yes and is a great idea. It's a great thing to embrace because you're not blocking the character from saying, no, you can't do that. Yes, and give me yes, and this happens, or yes, and absolutely. Go along with it. Don't block.
Where a player suggests an entire scene you weren't thinking of. You know, I talked about this last week on the show where my young niece talked about how her other sister was dragged into a room and the door was slammed and no one else noticed it. And everybody at the table agreed. That's a great yes and moment. And now the and is, and on the other side of that door is, and you come up with the interesting thing. But the flip side, I think, goes back to what we said at the beginning of the show. It can also be overused where you can yes and yourself in a large enough circle that you end up having the and I can't, Slim Pickens, is that the movie I'm thinking of where he rides the nuclear bomb?
Yes, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Love the Nuclear Bomb and Stop Worrying, something about
and
that.
He rides, as he rides the nuclear bomb down. All of a sudden, you can have a player character who's done that, and it's no more fun for anyone at the table because that player character just ended the entire game by having a nuclear bomb go off and kills everyone. Well, I yes-anded all the way to the point that we did that, and that was great, except now nobody gets to have any fun.
Right. Well, and you as much as you embrace yes and, it's fine also to say no. When a character goes, oh my God, he suffered a major head trauma. We're in the woods. I've got a rock and a stick. I'm going to perform brain surgery. No.
You're not.
No, you're not.
No.
Well, wait a minute. At least let me roll for it. No, because you're not going to pull. There's no way you're going to pull off brain surgery with a stick and a rock. Fuck no.
Again, this is where the no but can come in. You could go, no, but you could absolutely prop his head up on the rock, take the stick, and use it and your shirt to create a bandage to hold his neck still.
Sure.
And you can transport him to get brain surgery. I'll allow that. And you can absolutely go no but just as effectively as you can yes and.
Right. So don't feel like you're obligated to always say yes to everything either. Is kind of the good bad fun on that. It's as much of a great thing as yes and is. It can turn into a very ugly thing really quickly too. So you gotta.
I think that's true of any of those little, the GM tools that people talk about. The up, down, off the table for Savage Worlds.
Mm-hmm.
The marker is the model is either up, down, it's shaken, or it's off the table. Well, that's all well and good, but what about the wild cards who can take multiple wounds? Are they always down when wounded? How do you mark wounds? You can take anything too far.
Right.
And I think that's a big part of that GM lesson is you've got a full toolbox. Learn to use all the tools and not overuse any of those tools.
Right. And then I would say too, the final thing I'd like to leave everybody with is, and I almost hate to say it, but especially with Savage Worlds, it's very much a reality as a GM. Don't start making changes until you understand how all the rules work together, or at least the vast majority of them work together. Yep. Run it rules as written and get comfortable with rules as written, and then start making intelligent choices for your game. And I'll give you an example of what we're talking about. I'm not a fan of random fear reactions. So as nice as the fright table is for an NPC, possibly, I don't really feel it fits well for player characters. I understand the intent of the fright table. I understand why it's there. But if you fail a smarts check in one of my games, and make sure that if you do this as a GM, you make this announcement, hey, this is not standard Savage Worlds. This is how we run fear checks at this table. If you fail the spirit roll on a fear check, you're shaken. Now role play your reaction to the fear. You stand there and wet yourself. You're a deer in the headlights. You literally run away. You get false bravado and start challenging the guy to try to convince him you're not afraid. Whatever that is, and that goes, and I know that Dave feels the same way because we both share the same viewpoint. When you put a narrative, your reaction to fear is a player choice. It's a role play choice. How you react to something that frightens your character is a role play choice. It shouldn't be delegated or relegated to a random role that takes away your player agency on how your character reacts in the story.
I'm going to ask the player
narratively
what they're going to do, and I'm going to trust the player to react accordingly based on what the dice said.
Well, the interesting aspect of this, where Jared, I think the story, the anecdote needs to go to illustrate the point we're talking about, is we ran it with the fright table for over a year and a half in Dead End.
Mm-hmm.
And it came up so many times because it was a horror-centric game that we beat the hell out of that table and just never felt comfortable with the results with it being random. And because we had that exposure of playing it for a year and a half, rules as written, we were able to come up with a rewrite that didn't have this ripple effect to tear apart any other part of the system, but it had the effect on the game that was fun for us and for the players involved. And I think that's that aspect of it. Just like you're saying, we did that, but when I ran ETU, I went right back to the fright table to see how fear and everything worked in ETU. I didn't immediately say, well, no, I'm just taking the fear table out of ETU because I took it out of this other system.
Right.
Out of this other setting. Just because I have all these years of experience with Savage Worlds and a year and a half of experience with the fright table in Dead End doesn't mean I can immediately translate that over to make a change to ETU. So I've played ETU a half dozen times, seen how the interaction is there, and I can tweak that rule to be appropriate for ETU. That, I think, is everybody hears the run it rules as written until you're comfortable with it, and then you can make changes. Everybody hears that as being directed to people who are brand new to the system. No. Anytime you pick up a new setting, you're brand new all over again. I don't care if you've got 6 weeks of Savage Worlds experience or you're Shane Lacey Hensley, who wrote the damn game. When he picks up the Blackwood or ETU or any setting written by somebody else, even Shane needs time to familiarize himself with that setting before he can tweak and house rule for his table, because he has to see how everything in that setting works together. And I think it's that there's an innate, I can house rule anything because I'm the GM, hubris that gets in the way of saying, hey, maybe I should play this as it is a few times, get my feet wet, and understand it before I start tweaking it.
Right. Yeah, don't make decisions based on first impressions, because you can look at it and go, "Whoa, this -1 for all traits for every wound, dude. That seems harsh." Yeah, but if you don't counter in the fact that I have bennies and I can soak that damage before it ever hits me, then yeah, it seems one-sided. So the thing we're trying to say is, yeah, embrace the rules as written. It's not when we say run it rules as written. We're not saying don't have fun. We're not saying don't make it your own. We're saying you gotta crawl before you run. Understand how the system works the way it's written, so you know what the impact of turning one tiny little cog in that complex clockwork is going to have at the table. Another example would be the injury table. If you're playing a more modern, realistic style game, you may decide, hey, you know what? At my table, if you make a shot to the torso, all injury are going to be rolled under the torso section of the injury table. If I'm calling for a headshot and I roll damage, I'm going to roll any injury on the head section of the injury table, because it makes sense. Because then you don't get this. Oh, you took 3 wounds? All right, roll on the injury table. Okay, wait. How does this magic bullet zigzag through your hip, take out your leg, go up your shoulder, take out your arm, and then come out your eye? What is this? Some kind of magic fucking bullet? How do you narrate? Oh wait, you got three temporary injuries.
Narrate the player bouncing off of the furniture and shit in the scene, trying to come up with how they took 3 wounds from a shot that was a called shot to the knee.
Right.
That's where I think.
Or I punched him in the gut. I punched him. I gave him a right hook. Okay. Oh, it incapacitated him. Let's roll on the injury table. Oh, okay. Broken leg. What? How did he break his leg from a right hook that knocked him out? What the fuck are you talking about?
So, yeah, I think there's absolutely some places where you can go in, make it your own, but you need that experience of having played it before you can make those changes. And you can't, like, that example is great because then put that into traditional, Savage Worlds Deluxe experience, all of those things fit, but then roll that into Call of Cthulhu, where damage is a very different beast, and those injuries make a very bigger, much larger impact. And all of a sudden, the tweak that worked for your deluxe game won't work for that Call of Cthulhu game. And vice versa, it wouldn't work in Streets of Bedlam, where the wounds are a lot more graphic, but they're not as mechanically intensive. You're going to have a lot of injuries that don't amount to much in Streets of Bedlam. There's going to be buckets of blood, but there's really not as much damage that's taken when damage is taken. So I think there's an aspect of, you have to learn where to turn that dial to for each of the different things you're going to play.
Agreed. All right. We have anything else in the
Mel is asking the podcast. Since I said we're looking for younger blood to counteract your senior moments, he's offering that he can at least do as good pod as you sitting there smelling toast.
Sounds good. All right. Just be ready, Mel. If you got a camera and a microphone, be ready to be called upon. Oh, snap. Okay.
You would not be the first member of the audience to be called up.
Okay, so Jim, anything else to add? I mean,
nope.
Let everybody else get a word in edgewise. I mean,
what?
All right, so until next time, I said let everybody get a word in edgewise. You've just been chatty Cathy this whole fucking episode.
I'm trying to let people talk.
I'm just busting your balls a little bit. Okay, so check out the Patreon. So for those of you watching this live stream right now, it will not be available tonight on YouTube. It'll only be available to the Patreons who subscribed at that level to get early access to it. It will be posted to the YouTube channel when the podcast audio episode is published on Monday morning. So with that said, hop on over to Patreon if you want to get early access to the videos, early access to the audio, and also we're going to start adding some exclusive content to just the Patreon. And it may be a one little 5-minute video, blog post, things of that nature. So www.patreon.com/SWGM podcast. Until next time, this is Jared Savage Daddy Gunning for Dave, the Rules Baby Scott, and Jib saying keep rolling, stay savage.